our teachers are pretty creative and innovative, and I would say that given the opportunity and knowing them with time on learning, they would use that opportunity as another time to just learn in a different way.
Okay. Mr. Hill, back to you.
Thanks for that clarity there. I'm going to pause and let other people ask questions. Thanks.
Ms. Sawyer, did you have a question?
Yes, I had one other question. It's more of an idea since people are throwing out things. Since the state is opening in phases and we have 3 different plans, would it be feasible to open the schools up in phases? Like the first trimester, say we do all remote, which gives us plenty of time to figure out what needs to happen, or if the state guidance changes or anything like that. Would that be a possibility?
The short answer is yes. I mean, the plans are designed to move from one to the other, and how we do so and when we choose to do so is a local decision, unless there is a decision made at the state level, like there was back in March. So,
Okay, thank you.
You are free to decide to handle that.
Okay.
Any other questions on the specifics of the plans? Mr. Geddes?
One question I'll hold off on, but one, I noticed in the survey that was the initial survey that went out in July, in the initial survey that went out in July, the feedback was for folks that were, if we had gone to a hybrid model, it was a very close split, 52-48, 52% saying they would prefer to be back on a week-by-week basis as opposed to day-by-day. Can you speak to the rationale in not necessarily going against a very slim majority, but what was the rationale in going with a day-by-day plan versus a week-by-week?
One, because there isn't a mandate in one way or the other, we thought that we had a little bit of leeway to do what we thought was educationally the best. And while I think there's some real advantages going week to week for the older kids that would be interesting, in the end, we thought that the week on, week off didn't meet the needs of our youngest kids. I don't know if Ms. Reed wants to add to that at all.
And then with a closer look to the survey, as Superintendent Sawyer said, the high school, I think, was able to tip the scale a little bit more with the week on, week off. That was their preferred mode. And then the rest of the district was more for the weekly, the daily.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
Ms. Sawyer?
Thank you. Just to touch base on the survey Rob brought up. That survey wasn't sent out to every school, through every school. Coelho didn't send it out at all. They posted it, I think, on their Facebook page, but if parents didn't go look there. So those numbers really, to me, should be thrown out because it's not a true assessment of the whole district.
I'll start off and then I'll hand it off to you. That was part of the reason why we knew we needed to send out another survey. We knew that there were some schools that, for whatever reason, didn't have the opportunity to email it out. It was posted on social media, so that's the reason why another survey was definitely sent out.
Yeah, we had some problems at a couple schools, which quite frankly is just inexcusable in the end. And I'll apologize to any families who felt like that their voice was taken away from them and by their inability to take the survey. We need to do a better job than that. But this is why we've moved to Remind as being the district means of communication, and we'll be sending out information to families in the coming weeks. We believe that Remind is going to be a much more effective and efficient way to communicate because, not that there's any way to defend what happened, but sending a mass email through the system that we currently use is very, very challenging. And as it turns out, if you don't get it right, you don't necessarily realize that you didn't. We apologize for that unfortunate situation, and we're going to work to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Mr. Geddes?
I'll get my last prepared question out of the way now, I guess. Some districts are trying to find a way to use their after-school programs for childcare for essential workers. Is that something that we think may be feasible in Attleboro? Yeah, that's about it.
Right now, Abacus does not operate under DESI, it operates under early education. And the guidelines from early education are pretty strict and restrictive. So the numbers are very small that you can, in terms of the number of students you can work with. Right now, we're contemplating and looking at the younger children. We don't know where the cutoff would be. Normally we go right through middle school.
Right.
It's highly unlikely, as long as the current guidelines from early education stay in place, that we would be able to accommodate middle school students. It's just a question of how high we can go at the elementary school level, but those are the students that are most vulnerable to having needs for after school and before school care. So those are the students we're looking at. We're still trying to kind of assess where we're going to be able to draw that line to accommodate as many students as we can.
So it's a possibility, but hasn't been determined.
I think we're going to be operating. It's just a question of how many we can accommodate. How do we determine who's in, who's out, and how high we can go in terms of the elementary school level while staying with the guidelines.
Thank you.
All right, Steve,
Yes, Mr. Hill.
just a follow up on the equipment, lots of stuff. Mark, great job on ordering all that stuff. Is all that stuff anticipated to show up before the start of school? And will it?
Well, we have global pressures on some of that stuff. I'm kind of thrilled that the PPE pretty much is all in. We're still waiting on some gloves, but per the DESI guidelines announced, I think in June or something, we've got 165,000 masks on site right now. We've got disposable gowns. We've got all the things that we needed per the guidelines. The Chromebooks, as you would imagine, are a problem everywhere, not just in Attleboro, not just in Massachusetts. The state has started to get a little aggressive with the vendors and try to put pressure on them. We had to submit some of our data, how many we ordered, who from who, what were the delivery dates that were promised to the state, and I think they're going to kind of put the number together and say, look at this, get it to us. My understanding on the Chromebook front is Intel is really the kind of bottleneck. We were given a December delivery date. Dell has told us that, if Intel can do what it should be able to do, it might be October, but we haven't gotten anything more optimistic than that.
Mhm.
Mrs. Regan talked about desks, because again, we've had this collaborative approach for a few years now. So to get students into the buildings, we needed to order 2,000 desks. Those are going to be right at the wire. They're talking kind of mid-September. We're coming back mid-September, so that's going to be a close call.
Just one question on that, Mark, on the desks. So if the desks don't show up, is that a necessary condition for having, we'd have to delay more?
It's absolutely a necessary condition for full in-person. Hybrid, again, I think we can massage a little bit and get away with a couple of weeks.
Got it. Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions on the specifics of the plans? All right, my last question has to do with the last couple of weeks of summer. We've already pushed the start of school back to after Labor Day. The state then came out and reduced the days that were required and said that you could start on September 14th. I expect to take that up later. And I understand that a large part of the reasoning behind this is to give teachers the training that they need for all these different modalities, whether it's remote, whether it's, dealing with all the procedures required for in-person and then hybrid as well. Can you explain a little bit what that time period is going to be like and how it's going to be utilized?
So again, I believe some of this is part of our discussions that we have with the union, but first and foremost, I guess the most important one would be training for our staff in all the health and safety regulations and guidelines. That's number one. So we're working in collaboration with all of our nurses in the district and putting together pretty much a certification program that they have to follow to know exactly how to put on a mask properly, how to take a mask off, and what to do, proper hand washing technique, remaining socially distant. So that will take, I think, quite some time to make sure that everyone understands the procedures that are associated with that. Some other things that come to mind specifically are the use of technology. We will be using Google Classroom in a hybrid model and also in a remote model. And so we want to make sure that everyone feels comfortable using that. We want to provide some time for families so that they know how to use some of these platforms, especially our incoming K-1 families may not be as familiar with how to use a platform like Google or any of the applications that are a part of that full suite. And then also we want to provide some time for teachers to start to really think about their curriculum and what is essential and what they should be doing in-person learning and what remote learning would look like in a hybrid model. So those are just a couple things that come to mind, but I'm sure through discussions with classroom teachers, there'll be significantly more things that come up.
Thank you. All right. At this time, we have the 3 plans that have been submitted by the administration. They're the preliminary reopening plans for in-person with restrictions, hybrid model, and remote learning. So at this time, I would entertain a motion to approve these preliminary plans. Again, with a motion to approve, not meaning that you're approving anything for the start of the school year, but just that these are the plans preliminary that will be submitted to the state and that we will work off of as we move from different modality to different modality.
Should you accept?
Second. Any further discussion or questions?
Chairman Withers, might you want to consider the calendar as part of the plan?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. So do you want to discuss, do you want to just brief the committee on the proposed calendar?
Absolutely. I mean, to put it most simply, the state has allowed us to go to 170-day school year so that we can provide the 10 days of training that is being recommended. We already have 2 professional development days at the start of our calendar. Commissioner has allowed districts to bank days that were already in the calendar. And so that is our recommendation, is that rather than add the 10 to the 2 and go with 12, like some districts are doing, we're saying we should go with 10. That would allow us to start on September 14th rather than the 16th as some are doing. And I really like that because we would then have those days available to us throughout the year so that if there was an emergency and we had to switch to, say, remote, we could implement one of those days in the middle of the year as a transition day so that everyone can, switch from one to the other without needing to do so, one day to the next. So I really like the idea of having those 2 days in the bank. I like the idea of starting September 14th as soon as possible. You'll notice that we did add half days for the first 2 days. The thinking there is that we need the first day, whether we're in hybrid or not, those first 2 days, we really want the schools to be focused on protocols, right? Training students on what the safety protocols are, practicing them, using the time at the end of the day to debrief, make adjustments, and make sure that when we hit the ground running with full days on the Thursday of that week, is that the 17th?
Yes.
That we're, in full swing by that time. So I think that pretty much summarizes the ways that this calendar is different than the one that we have currently.
Did anyone have any questions about the proposed calendar that had been sent around? All right, Mr. Geddes?
For the professional development days, you noted the two in reserve. Are those just to be determined?
Those are the two that we would bank and use,
Okay, yep. Sorry.
as we think is necessary, if in fact something happens to us.
Thank you.
Mr. Vinci?
Mine's just procedural. Do we vote the calendar regardless as one motion, and then we vote to approve the plans as another?
So right now, what I'm going to request is that we have, is a motion to amend the previous motion to include the approval of the proposed calendar. So it's a motion to to amend the prior motion to add approving the proposed revised calendar.
Is there a reason to connect them?
What's that?
Is there
Because
any-
they're part of the plan, they're part of the proposed plan technically.
But I mean, to what Mr. Domenici is saying, full remote, hybrid, full in person isn't really affected by the calendar. Shouldn't we take these up?
No, but the
separately?
plans are based on that calendar.
Sure,
So
okay,
if we don't adopt that calendar, we're gonna have to make some changes to the plan.
okay.
Yeah, I simply meant, do we vote the calendar in
First,
first, and then we vote the plans?
I'd
I know
rather
it
just do
sounds-
it together, so.
Sounds ticky-tacky, I just wanted to know what the proper procedure was.
Yeah, the first motion's already on the table, so I think the easiest way is just to move to amend the motion, adding the calendar to the previous motion. So again, I'll entertain a motion to amend the prior motion to add approval of the proposed revised calendar.
So moved.
Second.
So now we are going to be voting strictly on the amendment to add the calendar to the prior motion. We're not voting on the merits. Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Geddes?
Yes.
Mr. Withers, yes. Mr. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Storrs?
Yes.
Ms. Porto?
Yes.
Mr. Domenici?
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer?
Yes.
Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Okay, now we have a motion seconded before the committee that approves the three preliminary reopening plans and approves the proposed revised 2020-2021 school year schedule. Again, this does not select the plan for the start of school, simply the plans themselves being approved in the calendar. Motion has been made and seconded. Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer?
Yes.
Mr. Domenici?
Yes.
Ms. Porto?
Yes.
Mr. Storrs?
Yes.
Mr. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Withers, yes. Mr. Geddes?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So that brings us to the question of how we're going to choose at this point to plan to open school. And it's 9:15 right now, and I don't anticipate the next section being brief either. So I'm going to say let's take a 3 to 5 minute recess and reconvene to get to the big topic of the night.
Oh, it's freezing in there. I'm glad I wore a jacket. We just had new shorts put in today.
Commentary via text on my phone.
Are you good at that?
Temperature's getting cold.
Oh, yeah, it is.
Where's the temperature? that you saw?
I might arm wrestle her for that.
Oh, it changes over to it? What is the 807?
If I'm cold, I know it's cold.
Y'all ready?
Raise we're gonna be.
69.5.
All right, welcome back. Welcome back to the Attleboro School Committee meeting of Wednesday, August 5th, 2020. At this time in our agenda, the next item is our continuation of the discussion on the reopening in school, specifically discussion as to the recommendation from the administration as to how to begin the school on the school year on September 14th. For that, I'll turn it over to Superintendent Sawyer.
Thank you, Chairman Withers. In terms of a recommendation, the first recommendation I'd like to make, and I've alluded to it already, the committee definitely needs to take up some policy concerns based on what we need to do for this year. Face coverings is definitely one of them. How to handle a switch from mode that isn't an emergency. Those kinds of things. There's a whole bunch of things to talk about. There's some models that we can take a look at. And so in the coming weeks.
Yes, I would just say you submit those to the policy subcommittee and,
Yep.
and they can take that up if their next meeting is not for a while. Mrs.
Well,
George, I would
actually,
just say,
Yeah, to speak that real quick, Ms. Singer already approached me about the need of having a meeting, so we're going to push one into later August.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay. So the administration has a recommendation for you tonight. I'd like to revisit the criteria that I mentioned earlier in the presentation and talk about how we feel about each one specifically, and then from that, explain how we reached our final recommendation. So in terms of feasibility, as I started with earlier this evening, it is the recommendation of the administration that we do not go in person at this time at Attleboro High School. We do not think that it is feasible to do well. Now, perhaps when we get to a place where we see how many students are actually in the building and we have some practice with protocols and get people in the building and really live with it, maybe the perception of that will change. But at this moment, from a feasibility standpoint, the administration recommends that we do not go in person at the Attleboro High School. As for the other schools, it is completely feasible. So, that there is a choice to be had there from a feasibility perspective. In terms of safety, there is, as I've already stated, there's no question that remote is the safest option for students from our perspective. And we think that bringing students back in certainly is an increase to risk, and then going full in person is another increase in that risk. But from the administration's point of view, under the current conditions in Massachusetts, that we do not think that it is unsafe to have students in our buildings. Right? That is not our position. We think that the risks to certainly bringing in people into a hybrid model are not such that we would have concerns around that. From a management perspective, there is no question that the administration, the building administrations, as they have prepared to create those plans that you have just approved, which I want to thank you all for doing so, they have serious concerns about their ability to manage their schools in an in-person setting from the start. The level of change, the regulations, all the things to consider, and just how crowded we are as a district leaves them very, very concerned about that. And so from a management perspective, the administration does feel like a hybrid is a more manageable start for us as a district. In terms of impact, we will be publishing survey data for the entire community. We have to go through and clean it up a little bit. The way that we do the surveys, at least currently, such that people can go in and take it multiple times. We also had some people who, for their own security reasons, didn't answer it in a way that make their answers something that we can tabulate. So we're going cleaned up a little bit, but we will be sharing that. But I can tell you tonight, as I believe you already been given, of the people that took the survey, which was 2,400 roughly, which we would estimate at about 2/3 of families, right? They represented 3,700 student responses. Yeah, so that's more than half, which on any survey is significant. We're not aware of anyone not receiving the survey this time, so we believe it's valid in that sense. So the survey results are significant, and they lead us to believe that we have about 20% who are saying that they want to go remote for the year, right? So that was an estimate that we had. We thought we were going to be in the 15 to 20% range, and that's where we've landed on the survey. Again, at least a third of the district didn't take the survey, so that number could change in either direction, but it's coming in roughly where we thought it would. Of the 80% who plan to join us in the plans and ride that out as circumstances dictate, we did ask them what their preference was for a start, and the results there are, again, there's no mandate one way or the other. So in terms of impact, it was 47% wanted in-person, 43% wanted hybrid, which from a statistical standpoint, we would say is pretty close to even. And then, but there's another 10% who wanted to start the year in remote. So I think the point there is that just under half think that we should be going in person. So I don't think this community has a strong sentiment one way or the other. I think, as has been the case, I'll just say anecdotally from my inbox, I think that there is a wide range of opinions about this. And I think there are loud voices on both ends of the spectrum. And the fact that the survey showed a divided community on this, I think reflects, what my experience has been. So there absolutely is a tremendous impact that has to be weighed here. But I don't think we are facing a situation where the community feels strongly in one direction or the other. And then, finally, educationally, I want to say very clearly that we respectfully disagree with the leadership of the MTA in their position that remote is the safest and best way to start the school year. We believe that kids belong in schools. We believe that under the current conditions, we can have kids in our schools, and we think that we can educate them better if we have personal contact. Now, there are some students who absolutely can't rejoin us for very serious reasons, and there are some families that are not going to be comfortable, and so we've come up with a plan for how to accommodate them. But for the rest of the students, it is our opinion that to start the year in remote is to squander the opportunity that we have right now to actually have personal contact with students, which is what we think is best for learning. Now, under normal circumstances, we would tell you that in-person is obviously the best, right? The traditional school setting is what we prefer. We're speculating because, as Ms. Regan has said multiple times tonight, we haven't done this before. We don't know how it's really going to be. We have our best intentions and we're going to give this our best effort, but we don't really know. But we believe that educationally, there is reason to believe that the limitations caused by the restrictions will greatly impinge on our educators' ability to do their best work. That it is hard to do the kind of teaching and learning that we believe in with kids at distance in rows facing one way. And that perhaps if we rise to the occasion, we can deliver a better education from a hybrid model under these conditions, because the hybrid gives us the best of both worlds. It gives us the personal contact twice a week that the remote does not give, but it gives us a chance to assign work that students can do in groups virtually on the remote day that allows us greater freedom to do more interesting work than what you can do when you just have them in rows. So from an educational perspective, hybrid might be the better way to do it in comparison to in-person under restrictions. So when you put all that together, the administration's recommendation to the committee tonight is that we start the year in hybrid. We think that that'll give us a chance to practice the protocols in the safest possible place. It'll give us a chance to get students into buildings to make connections, and will allow us to get our feet under us and to demonstrate to everybody that we can do this safely. And that if the conditions allow it and continue to be favorable as they are today, we would want to, within a few weeks of the start, reassess the situation and have a conversation as a community as to whether or not we believe that we've been successful enough to warrant consideration for a move to in-person. But we do think that a start in the hybrid mode would be the best choice for us as a community.
Thank you. I'll open it up for questions. Just a couple things off the bat. One, you touched on this a little bit, but I just wanted to make clear, is there any doubt from the administration's point of view that remote presents the most challenges educationally for our students?
So, it depends on how you frame these things. If you put in the social emotional concerns, if you think about the whole child, we absolutely think that we should only be going in remote as a response to an emergency situation, with the exception of the students who, for health reasons, just can't be with us. We would not recommend that we go to remote unless the condition with the virus is significantly worse than it is now, and we need to do so for obvious safety reasons like we did in March.
My next question is with regards to remote and hybrid. I think it applies to both. Is that it's just in looking into this, reading it, remembering what the spring was like, although admitting that it should be better in the fall. A hybrid model where students are out of the classroom for 3 days a week really seems to me like it will deepen the achievement gap that is already a problem that we try to overcome within our schools between students, based on family situations, parents' ability to be involved, internet connection, and what have you. It just seems like everything that we try to do to reach every child is going to be really exasperated and harmed by those type of models, where students aren't all in school every day. There are a good chunk of students who could go remote and could go hybrid, and they would do their work. Their parents would make sure they do their work. There are others who won't, and there are families who can't stay home to be with their children during the day, or maybe they elect to stay home to be with their children during the day, but that means that they don't have their job. So I just worry about what this does to the already wide divide in our community.
Yeah, absolutely. The more time kids are away from school, the more the differences of what home looks like has an impact on outcomes, right? The more time they're with us, the more control we have to do our good work to get the outcomes we're looking for. The problem, so for that reason, that's why we're taking a pretty strong stand and saying, I do not recommend remote as a starting place, again, under these conditions. Now, 2 weeks from now, that could all be different, but as we sit here today with the kind of conditions that we're looking at, yeah, for that very reason, we don't think remote's what's the best interest of children. Educationally, though, there is some thinking among both your rank and file classroom teachers to the degree that I have some sense of how they feel. And let's be clear here, some of them do believe we should be going remote. And I want to be respectful of the fact that we do have educators here in Attleboro who feel that way. But the fact of the matter is that many of them have been participating and helped us to come up with this picture that we have now. And both, again, many teachers, many administrators, we believe that there are things that we can do under hybrid help to offset that aren't going to be quite as successful because, again, it's not going to be school like we know it under any circumstance. And so, for example, under hybrid, because of the lower number of students in the classroom at the time, some of those concerns that you have, Chairman Withers, can be addressed by the small group work that can be done while the kids are with us. Whereas when we're in person, the size of the classroom, the way that the desks have to be spaced, really it gets in the way of the individual attention that we think that we can provide in a hybrid mode.
Thank you. Mr. Demanchi?
So I don't know where we start to go with everything that everybody might be thinking. But I guess, first off, Chairman, you brought up some very strong points that I think no matter what we decide tonight, I think everybody here is concerned about education, about what we may be missing. I have differences of opinions necessarily about gaps because I think the entire country is dealing with it. And it's, there's some relativity there, but I do have those concerns. I do have concerns about socioeconomic inequities, food insecurities. I do have concerns about the haves and have-nots gap widening. If we don't have kids in the classrooms, I am concerned about social emotional needs. I'm also concerned about social emotional needs with the structure that many of our kids, especially the younger ones, are going to be coming into, because we basically had to regress to 19th century industrialized learning methodology that we've been trying so hard to get away from in order just to have kids in here. And I'm concerned about how much time is going to need to be spent on procedures and protocols, and how often there's that virtual over my shoulder look to make sure that everything's right and everything's safe. And I'm concerned about some of the levels of education that we will be able to achieve. And I'm going to have those concerns no matter what. But I also agree that the best place for our kids to be is in the school when it's safe to do so. It seems like a lot of thought has been put into these plans under very short timelines, and I can't be prouder of our administration for everything you are doing. That being said, going to the remote model to open the school doesn't mean that we are staying there. My concerns are we go to a hybrid model where we haven't worked out all the kinks and we don't have a whole lot of time to do so. If we start with remote, we still have the opportunity to refine those opportunities to see what hybrid or even in person eventually gets to. My concern is that we start down a path where people are in class and 2 weeks later we're shut down anyway. And one way, shape, or form, that's going to be an impact on teachers, on parents, on students. So there's no good answer here. But my question, I guess, is, have we looked into some of the stock of the social emotional concerns that people are going to have being in the classrooms when they may not necessarily feel it's safe, but yet maybe for one reason or another, maybe their parents said, you have to be in here anyway, because we have to get you in school. Like, are we prepared for that? And has that been taken into effect with having some of these decisions right now?
I would say that a component of it is that we see the fall in the hopes that the numbers stay where they are as being an opportunity to really focus on social emotional concerns, to build relationships with kids while we have access to them, and to build the kind of classroom culture that will make us successful if we have to go to remote when we get into the winter and there's a second surge, as some people are predicting. So we really feel like there's an opportunity there. And for that reason, we're going to have to approach how we teach kids differently this year. And we're very concerned about academics. We always are. We're educated. That's why we come to work every day. But we recognize that students have been through a lot already, and they're going to be facing a whole different set of unfamiliar circumstances come this year. And, that's one of the reasons why we have 10 days at the start of the year, so that we can, as a district, work with teachers to make sure that we're all ready to meet the kids' needs, as they are, not necessarily as we would normally experience them. I don't know if Ms. Regan wants to jump in with anything else.
I agree with Superintendent Sawyer. I think one of the reasons why the recommendation is to start in a hybrid mode is so that we can establish those connections with students and those relationships. One of the things that I've heard anecdotally in speaking with classroom teachers is that they felt like they were able to support their students as much as they possibly could in that remote model because they already knew the student, they already knew the family, and they already knew how to support them in a remote environment. Starting fully in a remote environment, not knowing students, sometimes makes it hard to establish those relationships and make a connection with the student. But as educators, we always want to be with our students. So we just, I think everyone in this room knows that.
Mr. Storrs?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I want to say that I commend the administration for understanding and being vocal about how important in-person learning is. I don't think I could support full remote learning unless there is an actual situation where we would need to go to that. Because we live where we live and the numbers are what they are here, I believe that some form of, whether it's hybrid or full in-person, is feasible. I think it's safe to say if we were elsewhere and the numbers were higher, we wouldn't be thinking about them. Is that fair?
Correct.
Thank you. Looking at some of the experts, director of the CDC, for example, came out recently and said that, quote unquote, it's critically important for our public health for schools to be fully in person, to reopen fully in person. Dr. Fauci recently said that there are significant public health consequences if schools don't fully reopen in the fall. These are the experts, So personally, I would prefer K through 8 being full, in person, but I also hear and understand that that may not be feasible. That may not be the best option. There's a lot of other supporting reasons that I'll get into after I let some other people speak as to why I feel in person is that important. But I want to commend you that that you're not recommending full remote, and that right now it sounds like from the administration the hybrid is what you're recommending, but you're also saying K through 8 in full in person is something that could be done.
It could be done.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask another question just because it kind of ties into both what Mr. Domenici just spoke about and Mr. Storrs in regards to Mr. Domenici spoke about, fears that, the virus kicks back up and then we have to go to remote. And Mr. Storrs mentioned other parts of the country where the numbers might be higher. And one thing that I'm really struggling with is that if it's not safe to go back in person now, where the numbers in Attleboro are manageable and below 2%, when is it going to be safe to do so? And what are we going to say as a metric where we can say, okay, now it's safe to go back? Because to me, I tend to agree with Mr. Storrs where my personal preference would be we go back K through 8 in person with restrictions. But even saying that, I say that with the thought that it's very likely that at some point we may very well have to change if that second surge happens. So it's not that, I'd be burying my head in the sand as to the reality of the virus. It's just that right now it seems to be a relatively safe time. So if we're deciding that we can't go back now in person full time, when is it going to be safe enough to do so? And how are we going to determine that?
So I think you're right that the conditions are probably not going to be better anytime now, which is why I really wish to capitalize as quickly as possible on having in-person contact with students as much as possible. But the other part of safety isn't just the conditions, it's also our ability to follow the restrictions and to have the right protocols in place. And, quite frankly, nothing has prepared us to operate on the scale that we operate on before, right? We don't have a lot of experience with this. And I think that's part of why there's so much anxiety about the idea of going back, because we haven't really ever had the opportunity to do these things and do them safely. And so, people love to send me stories from both sides of the spectrum, as I've talked about. But for the people that are worried about a return and think that we should be playing it as safe as possible and going from remote from the start, I've been getting a lot of stories about, the camp this week that had the outbreak. I've certainly received several copies of the story about what happened in Israel. And, so we all know these stories about things that have gone wrong. When I read those stories, they never turn out to be that, and therefore we shouldn't go back to school. Those stories always end with, and it happened because the people involved didn't do what they were supposed to do. And so, even under the conditions we have now, it's not that there is no virus. There's virus, right? There's X number of people per week in Attleboro testing positive for the virus. Now, it's a low enough number that we think we can go back, but we do know that if we don't do it right, we could be the next headline. And that's, aside from the embarrassment of that, we certainly don't want to get anyone sick. We don't want to get our kids sick, and we don't want to get our staff sick. So that's why we believe that starting in hybrid will give us, under safe conditions, an opportunity to get used to what life looks like this way, and then get comfortable enough to say, okay, if the numbers don't go up, then we can make that switch.
Mr. Geddes?
Thank you. And I want to echo Mr. Storrs and Mr. Domenici in thanking the administration for all the time you guys have put into all of these plans, and that you're going to continue to put into all of these plans, especially knowing that 33% of the work that you have done will not be implemented whatsoever. At least 33% of the work you have done. So I happen to agree with the administration in terms of supporting a hybrid model. And it's not certainly not a light decision to come to. Mr. Domenici mentioned that there are going to be kinks related to anything we do with in-person or hybrid model. We're gonna deal with kinks, probably the same number of kinks with remote learning. Like there are going to be kinks everywhere because we're venturing into territory that we've never been in. With the procedures and protocols, I think the innovation of the administration and the classroom educators that we have that we've been spoiled by, I think can address a lot of those. Mr. Sawyer mentioned the MTA stance on fully in person. Some of the reasoning related to their stance, I did agree with, especially around the 3-person minimum. Although they've said to open the schools, they've still maintained that gatherings shouldn't be too large, that people should still be 6 feet apart, that we should be engaged in PPE as much as possible. So there are some caveats there that I think the hybrid model brings into place. That being said, my question is, and I know I've asked this in a couple of settings, but I just want to confirm that as of right now, the local and state departments of health have not given any quantitative numbers in terms of what it would take to shut down the schools, whether that's across the state or locally.
There is not currently an agreed upon metric, although okay. I know superintendents across the Commonwealth have pressed this matter, and we remain hopeful that that will be resolved before the start of school.
Because I will say, and again, even supporting something hybrid, I'm somewhat reluctant to do, and the educational components to it, the equity components to it, are the reason why I'm leaning towards hybrid. But I almost think we have to have a zero tolerance approach to it. That if we talked earlier about the procedure for one student or one teacher getting sick, our schools remember the other big issue we were dealing with in March, where we were talking about restructuring the grade levels and restructuring the schools. If we had a siloed approach to the educational system, where a student that goes to Willett their family is also at Brennan, that's a different story than, Thatcher and Studley feed into 3 middle schools that have connections to all 5 elementary schools and to the high school. So it's not so simple that one classroom, I don't think it's as simple as shutting down one classroom. I can see that being a large concern. So
Your comments remind me that although I've briefed the committee previously on this, people listening at home haven't heard that under feasibility, one of the things that we determined is that we cannot distance our students at 6 feet. Now, the guidance says at no less than 3 feet and 6 feet wherever possible. We can get everyone in at 3 feet, which again is in compliance with the guidance. But there are very few places in the district that we would be able to afford 6 feet. And so that's another piece to this, is that there's a real debate about whether or not 3 feet is truly safe or not. Now, the state says it is. I don't know that anyone really knows. And that's another reason we have for thinking that perhaps a started hybrid, see how that goes, and then bringing the kids in as well. Your comment about the feet, I hadn't mentioned that earlier tonight, and I should have.
But it's reasonable to guess that if we can get everybody in 3 feet apart, if only half the students are in, and realistically speaking, it would be less than half of the students because so many are going to be remote. So we're really looking at about 40% of the students. We can get them a lot closer to 6 feet than.
We'll be at more than 6 feet with a hybrid.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Okay. I do have other comments and thoughts.
Which is a better condition to practice all of these procedures.
Right.
Right. And get used to that environment and how that operates and how we function, both for the kids and for the teachers and for the administration.
And so I do have other comments, but the last one I'll make for now is that a little bit of context related to the hybrid, the 43% that we're interested in hybrid. A lot of the families that I have spoken to about the hybrid model, that want the hybrid model, want it because they want their child in school, but not for the full 5 days. So if our goal is to get as many students into the building as possible, I think if we go with an in-person model, you're not going to get those, you're going to lose a significant chunk of that 43% to the remote learning, which we've all said it has a number of concerns related to it. So I'll pause on my other comments for now. I apologize for taking so long.
Mr. Larson?
First, I would also like to thank the administration for the plans. I mean, you can just read through and you can tell it's an incredible amount of work that went into putting all those together. So thank you very much for that. And I know we're in the education business, and that's been what we've been talking the most about tonight, but we have to remember that we work for all the families in Attleboro. We work for everybody in Attleboro. And I guess some of the concerns I'm thinking about, we do have a lot of different families in a lot of different places. And hybrid, I think, is going to drive a lot of families crazy. I really do. I know we can't do in person at the high school and meet the guidelines. So to me, that's a hybrid at best. But K-8, I mean, how do you tell a working mom or two working parents if the third grader is going to be home 3 days a week? I'm thinking back to in the spring, even when we were out of school, we continued to provide lunches to a lot of families. We got to the point where we were giving out 2 lunches on Friday. So some kids would have something to eat on Saturday. We have a lot of students who they get breakfast because they can get it at school. They get lunch because they can get it at school. And that might be the 2 meals they get that day. So now they're only going to get those 2 days a week. So I'm a little concerned about that. I think if we can meet the guidelines for K-8 in person, I seriously think we need to do that for the sake of the students and the families and the community. I think, there's more than just education at stake. Education is what we do. I get that. But I think we have to look at the total family situation that we're going to do this to. And I have real concerns about the hybrid at the younger ages. Thank you.
Mr. Story?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Since Mr. Larson brought it up, I think I'll piggyback off that. First, I want to say that thank you to all the staff and parents who have been emailing us. I would say a month ago, I was getting maybe 5 a day, and I think it's ramped up to double digits every day from staff members. They did an amazing job of I'll speak for myself, but of letting me know their thoughts on this decision. And I very much agree with a lot of the concerns that were expressed in those emails. I also agree with a lot of the concerns that were expressed by the parents. I would say the majority of the parents, they rely on schools for a lot of things. A lot of them, we do have a lot of families that have 2 parents that work. And, we don't want to think, and it's not the case, our schools aren't daycare, but parents do rely on schools for the ability to work. So it is an issue that we need to take into account. That's why I do agree with Mr. Larson. It's the bigger picture. First, I think it's important to say, we talked about it before, but we need to say it again. No parent is going to be forced to send their kids to school if they don't want to. So any parent should understand, no matter what decision we make, they still have the ability to do remote learning, as we talked about earlier. So the parent should be okay as far as the decision that we make. But I'll get into it now. You talked about it before, the whole child. Education is what we do. Education is the most important thing, but there are so many other things that happen at school. So Mr. Larson talked about nutritional support. I talked to I talked to our business manager earlier today, and I heard around 40% of our student population are free reduced lunch. That's approximately 2,500 students, free reduced lunch. That's breakfast and lunch for the majority of those students every day at our schools. I commend the administration, and I'm glad that we were able to do what we were able to do during the shutdown. But from what I was told, we had approximately 150 lunches being picked up on a day-to-day basis. Think about that, 2,000, 2,500, give or take, students, free reduced lunch who rely on those meals every day, down to 150 being able to pick up those lunches. That's huge. So the nutritional support is a major issue. Mental health support, student anxiety, depression, that is a legitimate concern. I don't think anybody can try to argue that the services that we are able to provide within the schools are beneficial in that way for many students. Child abuse detection, upwards of 50%, actually upwards of 75% from what I was able to determine, up to 75% of child abuse detection happens within schools. And that makes a lot of sense. I'm not saying Attleboro, I'm talking nationwide, but generally that's a true statement. And the statistics show that over the shutdown, there was a 50% reduction in reported cases. So it's a legitimate concern. Drug use disorder. There was a greater than 10% increase in drug use in adolescents in Q1 compared to the previous year. And suicides, and then of course parents that will ultimately have to choose to either stay home to help their kids or go to work to support their family. These are all legitimate issues that is beyond what we've been talking about, beyond what we've been hearing from the staff and the parents. It's the whole child concept that we talked about. And lastly, I'll just say that the experts, again, the director of the CDC, Dr. Fauci, has indicated that full remote learning disproportionately harms low-income and minority students over the other students. Would the administration agree with everything I just said, generally?
I mean, you threw a lot in there.
I did, no doubt. No doubt.
I will say I generally agree with what you said.
Thank you.
Mr. Geddes, then Ms. Sawyer, then Mr. Domenici.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To Mr. Larson and Mr. Storrs' point around nutrition, under a remote model, we would set up the same food service that was available in the spring. Is there a reason to believe that under the hybrid model, the students that are out of the classroom would not be able to come pick up the meals just as they would if we were fully remote? Because we would have the same
not here to pick up lunch. Another important thing to make note of is the state has applied to the federal government to turn us into a community feeding program as we were in the spring, so that anybody who had, anybody could come and get lunch from the district.
And Ms. Medeiros, a lot of the social services and support services would also still be available to students on those remote days, correct?
So we have to provide the services whether we're in person or remote, so those services would continue. Our case managers would build a schedule for the caseload, whether that student is remote or in person.
Excellent, thank you. I'm gonna go see if we can get someone to adjust the clock.
Ms. Sawyer?
Thank you. I would much rather prefer that we would proceed with the staging going back. I mean, we're making all the assumptions that like we're going to maintain this 2% level going forward into the fall when they expect the second wave to hit. And I work in healthcare at Rhode Island's largest hospital, and they have made drastic changes to the visiting policy recently because they've been finding that people are not adhering to it. So I don't know how we can expect like children to actually adhere to these things that we're gonna ask them when adults can't even do it. And the hospitals are now cutting back visiting hours and the amount of visitors. I just think that it's like it's just crazy times right now, and our job is not only to educate the students, but to keep them safe. And I, for one, I have reservations, like say someone gets really deathly ill. Like I would much rather know that I voted with my conscience and not have to worry about that.
Mr. Manchin?
So I just want to reiterate again that every one of my colleagues here, I have full admiration for, that they have given every consideration for the views that they have today. And whatever vote we end up with, I'm going to fully support all of my colleagues for whatever fallback comes our way, because there's going to be some, because there is no good answer here. And Jim, you're a stats guy, and I always love that about you. And I can pick stats too. And I don't want to do that all back and forth. There are medical professionals who feel it's not safe to come back in school at this time as well. We could go back and forth on those as well. We could talk about some of the school openings where there's already immediate quarantines. And these types of things concern me. I'm concerned about all the things you've brought up, Mr. Larson and Mr. Storrs. And even with how I feel that we should be starting the year remote, I'm not going to feel well about that vote, just like I wouldn't feel fully well about a hybrid or in person for a lot of reasons, because I am worried about our community and some of these concerns. But I also feel that we are very good at thinking outside the box. We are a very innovative, grateful that stopped. Because it's hard to get your thoughts out when the meeting is happening. But, you know, we came up with solutions for when we were remote to offer food to our student body, to our community. It might not be perfect, but we have some solutions. We have good partnerships for social and emotional supports within our community that we can reach out to. And even if we are remote, we are required by law to provide some of those supports. So not perfect, but it gives me some comfort that we have that handled. And I really appreciate hearing that from you tonight, Yvonne, because that's important to me too. And I know the strain that there may be on, you know, parents that have to make a decision. And it frustrates me because not everybody's in the same station. And some of us are more capable of being able to adjust to a remote setting, and others are not. And it would be, you know, I would be remiss if I didn't bring that up, because, you know, my children are likely going to the academy. And I have the advantage to be able to do that, not without its struggles, but we can do it, and some can't, and I feel for that as well. This is an unknown entity we're learning about every day. And so those are the big concerns for me, because, you know, I'm trying not to be extreme here, but the idea that we would have any potential worst case scenario is how I'll leave it. For any of our students, teachers, administration, or any employee in APS, keeps me up at night, because we don't have a solution for it yet. And that's a challenge. And so there's kind of two different paths that I think all of us will go down. And one of them is, as you brought up today, Mr. Sawyer, I think both of these paths lead to going remote at some point. So one path is knowing that, let's get as much in-person instruction as we can, because we know that's good for kids, and I can completely respect that. And then the other is, we know we're gonna end up remote, and it may be very soon. So why take that risk yet when we don't fully have our hybrid and in-person with restriction plans fully vetted out yet? And it's hard because you need people in the building in order to make sure that it works. But it's hard to have people in the building, in my opinion, to see if it works. So for me, I think there's still a lot of unknowns, and starting the year off remotely, while not perfect, I'm choosing safety for myself. But I will respect what our body votes on tonight, and support it fully going forward. It won't be a case of, well, I voted this way. It will be a full-fledged defense of what we come up with tonight, because there is no great decision here for any of us. The one thing that gives me a little bit of comfort is knowing that we have 3 very well thought out plans that will be a flexible continuum throughout the year. And I have every confidence in our administration and our educators to be able to be flexible as we need to in order to provide the best education we can. So that's where I'm headed tonight. And those are my comments.
Thank you.
So thank you, Chairman.
Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I have some.
Sure.
I agree with what Scott was saying. I think, first of all, I want to proceed with an abundance of caution. I tend to view the COVID crisis, and certainly the deaths are awful, but I don't view that as, you know, the one of the risks that we need to think about are the long-term risks when they're unknown right now. And so I compare it to the polio crisis, and that certainly people died, but the reason you avoid and wanted to avoid polio because of the long-term effects of being crippled for life. We don't know what the long-term effects of COVID-19 are, and that's just an unknown, and that's an unknown that I'm not willing to play around with. I think certainly there have been some excellent points about the services that school provides. Lots of things have been coupled in with school. The primary purpose is education, yet along the way, there have been many, many services that have been added in which are needed. I do think it is possible to decouple those services and to address those separately. I don't feel like these secondary, still important purposes of school should drive the decision to go back to school. What should drive the decision to go back to school is that it's pedagogically you know, the most important thing. I, as an educator, can't imagine, you know, the benefits of being in person with a mask. And I will say right here, I mean, in this meeting tonight, most people took off their masks when they were talking. Some people didn't wear masks. It's not comfortable. My tolerance for a mask is about 2 hours. I've tried it. I don't know how long people have tried to wear their masks. It's not easy, and it, to me, severely limits any benefits one would get from the in-person elements. I also think, you know, I understand that mistakes are made. When we talked about the survey, it was talked about that execution of the plan didn't happen and that there were some mistakes made with the survey. And I think this is a problem when we think about executing the highly detailed and important plans. that would be involved with this type of learning. Unfortunately, the track record, as just measured by the survey that was not done at 100%, because of some miscommunications or failure to follow with the protocol, is an example of things that can go wrong. And these are plans that need to go extremely right. And that these things weigh very heavily on me. And I can't imagine doing any version of hybrid or in-person to start off the year.
I was going to piggyback on something on you said, Mr. Hill, and then take it to a comment that I wanted to make regarding masks. You're right that many of us aren't wearing masks because we set the room up so we're 10 feet apart, so we're not required to wear masks under current regulation. But that being said, I don't think anyone likes wearing masks. I don't think anyone thinks it's comfortable. I don't think anyone thinks it's ideal in any walk of life. However, the majority of people who have gone back to work have to wear masks. And the reality is that a large portion of this economy has reopened. And I question why schools should be treated differently in this case. Now, I realize that there are some differences here with, kids in school and, kids being hard to keep their mask on. But, if, the obvious ones, that people push back on, doctors, nurses, police officers, firefighters have been at work since the beginning. And, the pushback is that, some of those may have elected to take a job where there's some risk. Maybe not. I don't know if that's true for nurses, but what about supermarket workers? What about workers at restaurants now? What about workers in food processing that have been working all along? And they're wearing masks and they don't like it as well. But the point is that that's a sacrifice that has to be made to allow us to get by this. And I guess that's the end of my point on that, Mr. Guys.
Piggybacking on the mask, Mr. Hill, the reason I've been taking my mask off or I've tried to remember to, is more for lip reading purposes. I wish AACS had closed captioning capabilities. At least I don't know that they do. So that was my main reason for taking off my mask. I think something the administration has reminded us of repeatedly is that fully in person or fully remote compared to what we knew before now is not what it's going to be going forward. I think related to masks for me, it's more a matter of adaptability. We don't know how long we're going to have to wear masks. There are countries in the world where masks were a standard even before COVID hit, which is unfortunate to say, but I think I think us and our kids can absolutely adapt to it. I agree, masks are uncomfortable. I have a big nose, it presses down on my nose, it causes congestion, it's not ideal. My family traveled earlier this summer, so we had to deal with significant mask wearing. Our kids didn't like it, but adapted to it, understood the reason for it, and were successful with it. So I think I do share your concerns around, I share concerns with some of the people that have reached out to me about not every kid is going to be able to do that. And there can be mistakes made, which is part of why I'm supportive of hybrid is fully remote. If more of those mistakes are happening, or if those mistakes are happening fully remote, fully in person, if any of those mistakes are happening, we're putting more students at risk all at once, as opposed to in a hybrid model, if those mistakes are happening it's exposing fewer students. It's reducing the risk. We have more distance to prevent any type of exchange. So I guess I respectfully disagree with parts of your mask comment, but absolutely appreciate what you're saying. Thank you.
I think I don't want to lose the mask comment. It's not. I understand why people weren't wearing masks, and it's great that you were not wearing a mask for the lip reading purposes. The point is that it's hard to hear someone when they have a mask on, and when you're in person and instructing people or talking to people, that's not a benefit of being in person. And you know, keep on going back to the benefits of in-person learning. I don't see how pedagogically that it's a good thing. So that's just to clarify my comment.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Yeah.
Mrs. Storrs?
I just want to piggyback on something you just said. You know, a lot of the economy has opened up and a lot of people are considered essential. You know, they follow the proper PPE. And I think in a lot of ways, this is a compliment to what we do in the Attleboro Public Schools. I believe teachers, support staff, administration, I believe they're essential. I believe the in-person learning that we provide our students is essential. That's my opinion, but I strongly believe that it's that important. It's essential. You know, some of the emails that we received, they had us turn inwards and asked us, would we be sending our own child to school before we make this decision? What about your own child? You know, my son right now, he's in college, and he is going back to college. And it's going to be a hybrid model, just like what's being recommended, where some of his classes will be in person and he'll wear PPE, and some of it would be remote. And if my son was not in college and he was in the Attleboro Public Schools, I would be sending him back. But you know, because I've looked at the information, I've weighed everything, and I believe that the in-person learning is that critical. Thank you.
Mr. Minichi?
Just a couple of quick points. Jim, I completely agree with you that education is essential. A lot of us are essential. I work in financial services and I'm essential. We have 6,000 employees global and 97% of us right now are remote. So a lot of the workforce is coming back, but they're not all coming back in person. So I think that's an important distinction. A lot of companies are back, but they're figuring it out remotely. All you need to do is look at the MBTA lot and you'll see there's maybe a couple of different, you know, there's hardly anything there. So I just want to make that clarifying point. It's not the most ideal scenario. There is no ideal scenario. But, you know, I just wanted to make that clear. The entire economy is not completely open for business. You also brought up something else, and thank you, because you triggered something I wanted to ask Ms. Regan or Mr. Sawyer. How are students who are or are turning 18 factored into like the surveys? Because I've had some questions come in, like my son's going to be 18 and wants to make the decision on his own. How does that work? Like if we have adult aged children, are they allowed to make or take the survey and make their decision? Because I'm not 100% sure how that works.
Yeah, so for students who are at the age of majority, they have a legal right to make their own educational decisions.
Okay.
At the start of a school year, that's not nearly as many as at the end of a school year.
Yeah, I mean, you reminded me because somebody had asked me that question, so I wanted to make sure it was in there. It was a little bit off topic of my other comments, but thank you for answering.
Mrs. Storrs?
Yeah, so to kind of respond to a point you just made, and I'm not trying to debate, but I think it's great for parents who are able to work remote. You know, the fact that you're talking about having your children in the remote academy because you or your spouse is able to be there as a support system for your children. I think that's a wonderful thing for those parents who can do that. I heard from more than a couple of parents who said they were pleading, please be full in person because both of us work and we can't do this remote. We have to go to work. I have a 6-year-old, a 7-year-old, and I have to go to work and my spouse has to go to work. I don't know what I'm going to do. So although that might not be the majority of families out there, it is still part of our population. And as I talked about it before, it's the low income and minority families that are more greatly affected by that than others. So.
Get it?
Thank you. I was going to respond to Mr. Storrs' previous comment, and I'll adapt it based on what he just said. I don't want this, for me, I worry about us looking at this. I worry about us looking at this as through an economic lens. I absolutely understand and agree that we need to be supportive, to Mr. Larson's initial point a while ago, that we need to be supportive of the families in our district. We represent the families in our district. But they're only part of who we are working with and working for. For my mind as a school committee, our top priority has to be the education and well-being of the students. And so that's where I just worry about us using the words economic and making it, putting it in that context. Is it a priority? Are we trying to find a way to help our families? Absolutely. But I worry about it being the main reason for that. And that's something that I've heard from, that's a concern I've heard from a lot of folks as well.
I mean, one response that I've had to people who raise that concern to me is that when you're talking about the economics, I mean, you do take it into account, but what you're talking about is that a student whose parents both work and they have to go to work, so whether they quit their job or their student's home left alone, what impact does that have on the child?
Mm-hmm.
The child loses one of two incomes, or if it's a one-parent household, they lose an income or they're left home alone. So that's an economic impact, but it's an economic impact that should be important to our decision-making, in my opinion, because it has a direct impact on the social emotional health of the student and then potentially the educational growth of that student, in my opinion anyway, because, you know, I agree with the overall point, but I think, you know, sometimes in talking about, you know, the economics of it, people lose sight of what the underlying message and concern is.
Sure.
Mr. Domenici?
I agree. We can't not put, you know, we have to think about the economics of things. Like to take that out is irresponsible of any of us. So I completely agree, and it weighs on me heavily. And education and well-being is the priority. And in a pandemic, I feel like well-being and safety, for me, takes the highest priority. But it's not without a heaviness to any decision we make. This is hard. We're still here at 10 o'clock. We haven't had the motion. We're getting close, I assume. And I'll help that along by showing some brevity right now. So thank you.
And I wasn't trying to say we should ignore it altogether.
No, I agree. I know you weren't. I don't think anybody's trying to ignore anything tonight. I think everybody has very thoughtfully put a lot of concern. I hope everybody who's watching understands that nobody here is taking this lightly. You know, this is, I don't know. I haven't slept well. I'm sure a lot of other folks have spent a lot of time not sleeping, maybe answering a lot of emails. I mean, I heard from more educators than I can count. And as Jim said, it ramped up the closer we got to the day. And thank you for reminding me. I did want to make something clear, like, because I am somebody who will be voting that we start remote because I think we need more time to get our plans ready, and I think it's the safer approach. But remote to me still means a full day's education every day. What we did in the spring was crisis management. It really wasn't remote learning. It was crisis management. It started off as a 2-week plan, and then it went to a month, and then it went out, and then it went out. Every one of our school committee meetings, we didn't know what was going to be happening. And I do hold DESE a little responsible for that because they delayed a lot of things, which then has a trickle-down effect to our ability to react. If Desi had come forth in June and said, here are your plans, put them together by this date. Maybe we've got a little bit more time to think them through. So I am very cognizant of things like that, but I wanted to stress that it's a full day's education, no matter what model we choose. I am working remotely, but on my time that I work, I am working, and I have to leave it up to my wife, who is not working, to handle my children. That's something I have to do. I mean, because I still have to work. And I expect that of all our educators, no matter what our model is. Because if it's, it's seemingly looking like we're either looking at remote or a hybrid, in-person seems not feasible on some levels, but no matter what it is, it has to be that Monday through Friday, for the time that school is in session, that those educators are there and engaged. Like, that's the piece we have to focus on, and we have to focus on our students. And as much as I can sympathize with any educator who may have to figure out their own family situation, it's a working day, so that's the responsibility. And I wanted to make that clear because, and I think most educators agree, but I did get some emails that gave me pause, and it made me concerned. So here we are in an open forum, and I want to make it clear that that's my expectation, no matter how we vote.
Mr. Storrs and Mrs. Sawyer?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, so it seems apparent that as far as the discussion that some of us had talked about with the K-8 being full in person, I think it's safe to say that there probably isn't enough support in this room for that to pass. But
I don't know if I said that because we haven't heard from everyone.
So what I was going to recommend is maybe that could be when the time comes. I know that the recommendation is the hybrid, but I think it might be, because ultimately, as Mr. Larson had indicated, as I indicated, that would be my preference, K-8 full. But if that doesn't pass, then I would want to go the other route.
Yeah.
So can we maybe
So
start?
my plan is to take each level individually.
Okay.
It's a unique voting situation because we have three options and it's pretty split. And to start with the motion for in-person,
Okay.
vote that,
Thank you.
move down to hybrid if we need to.
Great.
Move down to remote if we need to, and we may need to do it a few times
Yep.
because people have second and third choices. So,
Perfect, thank you.
Mrs. Sawyer, then Mr. Hill.
Thank you. I agree with everything that Scott said, and I just wanted to touch on a couple things. It's like, my employer is one of those ones that figured it out, so I can work from home. But I'm working from home. I don't have that ability to just be like, pause my work and go help my daughter. So I'm relying on the teachers to actually educate her. I mean, no matter how we vote today, someone's gonna be mad. We're gonna make someone upset. So we just really have to think about what is really in the best interest. And depending on who you talk to, it could be because of the socioeconomical, I mean, there's just, I'm just torn over this.
There's no good answer.
No, there is no good answer. Thank you. But it's like, just because I'm lucky enough to work from home, doesn't mean I'm gonna be able to help my daughter. It's like, I rely on the teachers just like everyone else. I just feel like when you think about the education and well-being, you can't, like Rob said something a few minutes ago, it's like, you can't have everyone in all at once because it's like, you're putting them at risk. Well, you bring them in half, it's still half the risk. And it's like, I don't want to play Russian roulette with your kid or my kid. And that's not fair for us to do that, to make that call for other parents, and so that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Mr. Hill?
Yeah, I just want to respond.
I truly believe there's some well-intentioned thoughts and comments about the lower socioeconomic students. I think I work with them daily in my work or my day job. I think one thing that also should go into the consideration here is the quality of healthcare and the healthcare insurance for low-income students. And we're putting people at risk who are and have access to poor health quality, health care insurance and poor health quality. And that's not a good situation. I think that just further backs up the reasons to go remote.
Thank you. Mr. Storrs?
Well, I just wanted to respond real quick. We talked about it before. No parent is going to be forced by our decision to send their kids to school. So we're not playing Russian roulette with anybody's kids. Ultimately, it'll be a parental decision. If there's a parent who feels that strongly that they don't want their child to go to school, we've talked about it, there's options. Is that a correct statement? Thank you.
Mrs. Sawyer, you have your hand up?
Well, I just wanted to piggyback off something that Bob said. I work in healthcare. I work in the medical field dealing with patient claims. And so I see people like, okay, for example, like Medicare. Medicare will pay a medical claim at 100% if it's COVID related. If not, you either get a deductible or a copay. Or it's like, and it's unfair for these families that are on Medicaid or Mass Health in Massachusetts. It's like, they're gonna get hit with things. If their kids get sick and then have to go to the hospital or even to the doctor or telehealth, whatever, these things aren't free, you know, and they, like Bob said also before, we don't even know the consequences going forward, like the lasting effects of these things. And like, so we could potentially be putting someone at risk, like for anything. I've heard people getting double lung transplants because of this. It's like, we want to ruin someone's future for the chance that, oh, well, we could get a few weeks of in-person and then we might have to go. It's like, there's just way too many unknowns right now. And we're dealing with people's lives and livelihoods. And I mean, like I said, there's no answer that's going to be right for everyone.
Mr. Geddes?
So a few moments ago, and I apologize, I don't remember who said it, but the comment was made that there are no good options. That's obvious. We have three far less than ideal options before us. So for me, it's a matter of what's the least awful option. Given all of the grave concerns we've discussed around fully in person, we're worried about safety. Given all the concerns around fully remote, we're worried about equity, access to services, and that's part of why I'm sitting in the middle in the hybrid. I'm going to steal an analogy from someone that a hybrid model is a training wheels model. We ultimately want to get back to in-person education. Starting off in a hybrid model gets us to figure out where we are, what our plan is, what's working, what's not working, and then transitioning from there. If we have to transition to remote because of an incident in Attleboro or in the region, or because the state has dictated so, then so be it. And I don't say that loosely in terms of someone gets sick, who cares? Obviously that is the worst case scenario. But the hybrid model reduces the risk that the fully in-person model does. And to Mr. Storrs' point, for families that are concerned for their student or for a family member in the household, they do have that choice. So the 30% that have said that they're remote for the year, or the 10% that have said that they plan to start remote, that safety net is there for them regardless of our vote. It's just trying to find a way to service those other students to get them into the building or to find the best educational situation for the rest of those students, while also doing the best to keep them safe if the parents choose to send them back. I hope to make that my last comment before a motion is made.
Any other questions, comments? All right, then before we get to a motion, let me just, it's 10:35, so what the heck, let me grandstand a little bit and just say that thank you to the administration, like other people have said, for the work they put into both the plans and the recommendation. that they've made tonight. And thank you also to the committee members for all the hard work and thought they put into it. As has been said, there's no easy answer. I appreciate all the hard work. We've made a lot of decisions on this committee that, have had major impact, from budget issues in the past to the new high school, to Tri-County and controversial decisions that were hard to make. And this is certainly, dwarfs all of those, and the impact and the response that we've gotten from the community, and kind of the weight that it puts on our shoulders. So, I do want to thank all of you for that. And with that, like I said before, I think we're going to start with elementary school, which is K through 4. Because it's unique and there are 3 options and seem to be pretty split, I would like to start with a motion for in-person at K through 4. And then if that is your choice, I would ask you to vote yes. If it is not your choice, you vote no. We'll then move on down the list. And if we get through the list and we don't have 5 votes in any, then we'll start over and go again until the changes have been made. If you vote yes in person and it doesn't pass, you can certainly vote yes for hybrid or remote if that's your choice later on, or you can vote no and go to a second round. So any just questions about the procedure before I ask for the motion? All right, at this time, I'll entertain a motion to do in-person with restrictions at our K through 4 schools.
Will that be pre-K?
So pre-K is a special ed program, so it falls under special ed guidance. So if you vote hybrid, they would be in person. That would be our preference for them. If you wrote remote, I still have to provide services for them.
So it sounds like pre-K.
Yeah, so I'll entertain a motion for in-person with restrictions at our elementary schools, pre-K through 4.
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Johnson?
No.
Mr. Geddes?
No.
Mr. Withers, yes. Mr. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Storrs?
Yes.
Ms. Porto?
No.
Mr. Domenici?
No.
Ms. Sawyer?
No.
Mr. Hill?
No.
And the motion fails 3-6. This time I'll entertain a motion for the hybrid model at our elementary schools, pre-K to 4.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Ms. Sawyer?
No.
Mr. Domenici?
No.
Ms. Porto?
Yes.
Mr. Storrs?
Yes.
Mr. Larson?
No.
Mr. Withers, yes. Mr. Geddes?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Hill?
No.
Motion passes 5
5 to 4.
So the school committee has voted hybrid for our K through 4. At this time, we'll entertain a motion for our middle schools 5 through 8 in person with restrictions.
So moved.
Second?
Mr. Hill?
No.
Ms. Sawyer?
No.
Mr. Domenici?
No.
Ms. Porto?
No.
Mr. Storrs?
Yes.
Mr. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Withers, yes. Mr. Geddes?
No.
Ms. Johnson?
No.
Motion fails 3-6. I'll entertain a motion for our middle schools 5 through 8th grade for the hybrid learning model.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Hill?
No.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Geddes?
Yes.
Mr. Withers, yes. Mr. Larson?
Wait a minute. You were not there.
What's that?
So Bob
a
was
no.
no. Shannon,
Yes.
yes. Rob,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
I'm no.
Jim?
Mr. Storrs?
Yes.
Ms. Porto?
Yes.
Mr. Domenici?
No.
Ms. Sawyer?
No.
5-4.
5-4, you passed.
Finally, I will entertain moving on to the high school, the administration indicated before it was not feasible to provide in-person with restrictions at the high school. So I will entertain a motion to go forward with the hybrid model at the high school.
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Johnson?
No.
Mr. Geddes?
Yes.
Mr. Withers, yes. Mr. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Storrs?
Yes.
Ms. Porto,
No.
Mr. Domenici,
No.
Ms. Sawyer,
No.
Mr. Hill.
No.
Okay, a motion for remote learning at the high school.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Hill,
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer,
Yes.
Mr. Domenici,
Yes.
Ms. Porto,
Yes.
Mr. Storrs, no. Mr. Larson,
No.
Mr. Withers, no. Mr. Geddes,
No.
Mrs. Johnson,
Yes.
that's 5-4?
5-4, remote.
Point of clarification?
Yes.
From the administration, my understanding is if we're doing full remote, there's no sports, or is that not accurate?
Our students will not be eligible for athletics.
Thank you. So no football, no sports because of the decision we just made, right?
You want a motion for reconsideration?
Is that your guidance or is that
State.
MIAA guidance?
MIA.
The commissioner indicated that on a conference call last week. I have not seen it in writing anywhere.
That was mentioned earlier on in the meeting.
I know, I just,
That's why I brought it up.
earlier, it didn't seem like it was confirmed.
Oh,
I'll entertain a motion to reconsider before we move on. Like,
so moved.
Second?
this is a motion to reconsider the motion. Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Geddes?
Yes.
Mr. Withers, yes. Mr. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Storrs?
Yes.
Ms. Porto?
Yes.
Mr. Domenici?
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer?
Yes.
Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Now we have now I'll entertain a motion for remote at the high school.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer?
Yes.
Mr. Domenici?
Yes.
Ms. Porto?
No.
Mr. Storrs?
No.
Mr. Larson?
No.
Mr. Withers, no. Mr. Geddes?
No.
Ms. Johnson? This is remote.
No.
All right, so we'll go back to hybrid. I'll entertain a motion for hybrid at the high school.
So moved.
Second?
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Geddes?
Yes.
Mr. Withers, yes. Mr. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Storrs?
Yes.
Ms. Porto?
Yes.
Mr. Domenici?
No.
Ms. Sawyer?
No.
Mr. Hill?
No.
Motion passes.
Thank you, everyone.
6-3.
All right, that concludes that. And moving on to in our agenda, we have our minutes from our July 20th, 2020 meeting. They've been circulated with the materials. Does anyone have any, actually, first I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion?
I thought that's what we were here to discuss. Isn't that the big council ticket item?
Yeah, I
Grand
got 16
finale.
questions about the minutes.
Mrs. Johnson,
I'm sorry.
approve the minutes.
Yes.
Mr. Geddes?
Yes.
Mr. Withers, yes. Mr. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Storrs?
Yes.
Ms. Porto?
Yes.
Mr. Domenici?
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer?
Yes.
Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Okay. Now we have open forum. This is the time where members of the community can address the school committee. Is there anyone that would like to address the school committee at open forum?
Melissa Santos from 40 Nick Rock Road.
Welcome, Ms. Santos. Please feel free to address the committee.
Hi, good evening. Thank you. So I think some of my questions had been answered as I'm listening through this meeting. Some of the questions that I had is if you had multiple children in your family, for example, I have 4 children across all levels of the school system. 2 would be at elementary, 1 at middle, and 1 at the high school. And looking at the hybrid model, I believe what was indicated was that in terms of cohorts, it would be considered for all my children to be in the same cohort. So I'm not having to deal with 2 going in on one, on 2 days and 2 of the others on other days. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. The other question I have in regards to busing, my high schooler would initially start with the busing. How many students are we looking at in each seat? Is it going to be 1 student per seat?
One person per row, correct? Or per seat? Yeah, per seat.
Family can have siblings sit together? Okay.
The other question I have, I don't know if this is a question for this forum or if there's somebody else I need to be in touch with who I was prior. I potentially have an incoming kindergartner. Do we know at this point when, since school is due to start September 14th, do we know any idea when that assessment testing is going to be looked to be done?
We're actually in the process of planning for that right now. Now that we know that the calendar has been approved for this year, we'll be able to plan for the screenings and set a start date for kindergarten.
Great, thank you. Also, I had this past school year, I had a 5th grader who's now going into 6th grade. 5th graders had to hand in their Chromebooks. Upon entering, the start of 6th grade, will he be getting that back?
Yes.
Okay, and potentially my incoming kindergartner, would there be a Chromebook that would be available to that student?
We have ordered devices for pre-K and K. They are not Chromebooks. They're like iPads, but they operate the Chrome operating system.
Okay. And then in terms of the calendar, does that include like a February and April break?
Yes, the same breaks that were in place before. The only change that was made to the prior calendar was pushing the start date back. So still the same holiday break, still the same February break, and still the same April break.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm sure a lot of us have so many questions.
Okay.
Are the hours of schools changing at all? Like, for example, the elementary, doors typically open 8:30. I believe school started, 8:40, and then they're done at 3:20. Are those still the hours that we worked on, prior COVID? Are those still the operating standard school hours?
Now that the district has a mode that we're going to be operating under, we need to review that. If there are changes, it'll be pretty modest. We just need to make sure we do the disinfecting that we're able to do, brings students in and brings students home within the current confines of the hours. And if not, like I said, the changes will, if there are changes, will be modest, like 15 minutes or something.
Okay. And then I think that my last question is during this spring season, when all of this pandemic happened, when we were doing remote, teachers had office hours that were offered to the students. If we potentially go into a hybrid model, will that continue to remain? Will teachers have office hours that either parents or the students themselves can access the teachers?
In a hybrid model, the students will have access to the teachers at the start of the day and the end of the day. In a remote model, they'll be interacting with teachers throughout the entire day.
So there won't be any specific offered hours, for example, the elementary of those?
This is, I guess, a short way of saying they really won't need office hours because they'll be interacting with the students pretty much through the entire day. So their questions could be asked in real time to get an answer right away.
Okay, I appreciate everything. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address the committee at open forum?
Chairman, we have a Lori Sawyer from 136 Curtis Drive, sorry.
Good evening, Ms. Sawyer.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay.
Thank you.
I have a few things to say. There was talk about not being forced into doing something we didn't want to do because there's a virtual academy. But I wanted to say that it was said by Ms. Regan that it's not the same and that we will need to stay for the year and wouldn't be able to change back out if we wanted to. So I was a little concerned about that, especially now since the vote is hybrid so that they can have sports.
Just for a point of clarification, you're correct that it's not the same thing as curriculum. It's not going to follow the same day by day, but you can choose to go back into the regular school classroom. It was the administration's recommendation that they thought that it was best that if you start in the academy, you stay there, but it does not mean that you're stuck there. If you decide you want to do something else, you do have the option and right to decide to go into hybrid or in-person classes, even if you start in the ABA. It just wasn't what they thought was the best choice, but it's still a choice you can make.
Okay. So there was also talk about, the numbers are low in the city, and yes, they're low in the city because they're limiting the in-person contact. They're wearing masks. They're staying apart. They're standing in lines at Walmart. And so I'm seeing now that the vote being hybrid and allowing sports, that's not limiting in-person contact, and that's setting the students up for failure to get this virus. And the experts in science tell us that this virus is aggressive and unforgiving and doesn't care about our education for these kids. And so what about the possibility of youth being more of a carrier of this virus without symptoms? So any number of days in the schools, they can bring it home, the virus, to people who are susceptible to that. And then nobody will know until they get it badly or die.
Thank you.
Steve, can I have just a clarifying question? Is it the sports question? I've heard that sports aren't actually happening, even if people voted to have high school because of the sports thing. Are sports happening? Can anyone provide any detail?
They have been delayed. We're waiting for a vote from the MIAA. I do not know right now whether or not there will be sports or not. I mean, there's reason to wonder if there will or there won't. It's at best, I don't think all the sports will run this fall under any circumstance, but I'm not aware of a determination. Mr. Furtado, do you know anything?
Well, they made this vote. So then you made this vote for sports with hybrid, and they're not really even going to be happening.
But it's not just point of clarification, it's extracurricular activities in general. Sports are what get the most press and what was mentioned. But there are extracurricular activities as well, and after school activities at the high school, that if it wasn't safe for students to go to school, if that was in person, if that was our vote, then it wouldn't be safe for them to participate in those extracurriculars as well. So, it's not just sports.
I just want to say that the rec leagues in Attleboro are running, but they're following the state guidelines because there's specific guidelines for sports. So sports are happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think there's a lot of different, you can hear a lot of different things that, for instance, I've heard that, in colleges, for instance, like a lot of colleges that are canceling football or things like that are still keeping non-contact sports like track or cross country, which, may very well be the way that we land here. So we just don't know yet.
I think my comment was that you made the vote, you changed it for sports, and from remote. Just, and some sports are happening and some aren't. And I just wanted to kind of make that comment so you could think about that.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address the committee at open forum?
Chairman Withers is an Ashley Nyland from 238 Steer Street.
Welcome, Ms. Nyland. Please feel free to address the committee.
Being an educator myself, I get both sides of this. I completely understand that there's people who, don't want their kids in school, but there's people like me who's educated. I do have to go and teach. Unfortunately, my husband does work out of the home as well. Has there been, and I know it was discussed, Mr. Geddes asked, and I believe a couple other people asked, is there any thought on using abacus for essential workers who, on the days that children are not in school? I know it was mentioned to using it before and after school, but has there been any thought on offering some sort of care for people who do have to work out of the home and don't have other options for their children?
So we are working on options, especially with other partners who might be able to help us out with this. I should also mention that there's talk at the state level of having special dispensation for educators to have access to that, a full week of school rather than the hybrid model. So we're waiting for more guidance from the state on that. But that's another piece for this. But yeah, we have people in the community that reached out to us who want to help us because we know that we're going to have families who need support.
Right, and I know there's things that people are establishing as pods. So, if there's some sort of, way that we can get those families together to help support each other, and figuring out a way to, so that teachers can be back in the classrooms, whether it be remote or whether it be full in person, there needs to be some support for them so that we can make this work.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address the committee at open forum?
Chairman Williams, there's Jennifer Juschlag, I think that's how you pronounce it, sorry, 124 Steer Street.
Good evening. Please feel free to address the committee.
Hello, I'm sorry, I was muted. I would just like to actually ask Yvonne Medeiros a question. I have a son who was in the sub-separate classroom at Studley last year, and he is moving on to Coelho, and he's going to be in that sub-separate classroom again. But he is on his IEP, it states that he should be going into the inclusion classroom for math and ELA. So I want to know if instead of that, he will just stay with his sub-separate classroom for all of his subjects, so we're not like intermingling him between the classes, or if there will still be some kind of plan for him to go in those inclusion classes with a para.
So hi, good evening. So we are working on a plan for those students in our programs that are kind of these partial inclusion placements where they go into general education and what that would look like. The majority of those students would be in a hybrid model. They would be in either cohort A or cohort B with the option of, depending on the program and the student's IEP needs, receiving on the remote days some in-person services as well.
Okay, so we're not really sure until you look at each individualized student to see which cohort would be better for them.
Correct. And the SSC at Studley and Coelho, those programs would be prioritized on remote days for some possible hybrid services, depending on the student's IEP.
Okay, thank you very much.
Is there anyone else who would like to address the committee at open forum?
Chairman Williams, there's Mike from 25 Baruso Drive, would like to address the committee.
Thank you. Welcome. Please feel free to address the committee.
Good evening. Thank you for taking my comment. I'm just disappointed that certain members kind of bullied others into changing their vote just by throwing the sports topic out. I am glad at least that we're at the hybrid level. I know we would not be sending our student back full time if it was full classrooms, just because even if it is feasible, I don't think it's safe. Children, especially the younger grades, are going to have trouble with keeping their masks on and following the protocols as it is. But I was very disappointed in how certain people basically bullied other members. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Are there any other individuals who would like to address the committee at open forum?
Chairman Williams, there's a Robert Burnett from 349 Central Street in Mansfield.
Well, Mr. Burnett, please feel free to address the committee.
Thank you for taking my my comment here. My son will be starting kindergarten here hopefully with you guys shortly. Most of my questions were answered here in the lengthy debate, and I thank all members for the participating in what has been a long meeting. I guess my parting comment here would be that I think we had a good opportunity here to provide the parents the choice between whether they needed to address some of the concerns that were highlighted regarding socioeconomic situations and their ability to provide adequate education at home, or whether they needed the district so that they could go collect a paycheck and support their families, whereby you guys have provided the opportunity, regardless of how your vote had turned out, to do remote learning. So I'm disappointed to see that we did not put that situation where it was in the hands of the parents. And I think that's kind of it. Thank you guys for your time today.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address the committee at open forum?
Chairman Withers, David Quinn from, I'm sorry, would like to address the council.
Mr. Quinn, please feel free to address the committee.
Good evening, Chairman Withers, honorable members of the body, Superintendent Sawyer, Assistant Superintendent Regan. Thank you very much for this deliberative debate. The immense decision before you, I know, was not entered into lightly, and I know that the amount of effort that was put into both the preparation for this meeting and then the debate that came afterwards was both substantive and relative, and I have every confidence that the administration will carry out what's in the best interest of the students, and I know that our high quality staff will do the same in no matter what environment we ultimately end up in. I did have one point of clarification. It just broke that Mansfield Public Schools has opted into a remote start, and given that they are a member of the Hockomock and that sports seem to be a determining factor in the vote, I just wanted to raise it to the committee, considering that that seemed to be a substantive portion of the committee's ultimate vote, and thought you should be aware of it. Thank you very much, and I appreciate all the effort that's gone into the planning. You've done an excellent job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to address the committee at open forum?
Chairman Withers is Lauren Almeida of 82 Hemlock Drive. Would like to address the council. I'm sorry, committee.
Hello, Ms. Almeida, please address the committee.
Hello, thank you. I want to first acknowledge I understand how hard everyone has worked and engaged in all of the discussions that were generally really respectful. So that's really appreciated. What I just wanted to say, because I doubt this will be the last time this everyone sits around and has to vote, is that I was disappointed in those that did not vote for minimally a hybrid version, because essentially what you did is made the choice for us. And as parents, we deserve the right to make that choice. And there's a lot of factors to consider. So I just wanted to outline that the school has been very clear that anyone has the option to do virtual. And so minimally providing parents the choice to make what's in the best interest for their child and their family is really what, you know, making a decision for all community members is about. So I would just ask for those that maybe voted that way to reconsider voting more based upon what would allow the most choices for all community members versus what might be personally your belief and or what you think should happen. But thank you all for your time and dedication into everything that we all know is happening, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address the committee at open forum?
Chairman Withers is Laura Dolan from 29 Erica Way. Would like to address the committee.
Hello, Ms. Dolan. Please feel free to address the committee.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Excellent. I realize it's late. I'm extremely disappointed in the decision as far as the complete remote learning. I was told, I asked specifically some school committee members if your child would be penalized for remote only, and they said absolutely not. Well, considering it's almost like a different school where you're going to be segregated from the other children that you normally go to school with, That's not right. I mean, my son's in a CTE program and nobody had any answers on CTE. So, you know, when you're talking about it almost being a different school, that's being penalized. And, you know, when you change your vote because of after school activities and sports, that's disappointing. So, you know, I just feel like, you know, that we didn't have any answers on CTE, and the fact that you're going to completely segregate the kids that choose not to go to school and risk the health and safety of everybody, that's not the right way to go. And it's extremely disappointing, and I'm extremely upset about it. And I just wanted to be heard on that.
Thank you, Mrs. Dolan.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to address the committee at open forum?
Chairman Withers, there's David and Neil Bowie.
Good evening.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to take the opposite of extremely disappointed. I think it was a no-win situation in anything that you guys picked. I think giving everybody the best was to kind of split it in half and to do both and let any parent do what they think is in the best interest of their child. It's not just the health of a child with COVID. We've got, you know, the social aspect of it. Some by not going to school at all. So, you know, we're playing all the positions that we can. I think everybody that's felt one way or another cares about their children just like everybody else does, just like all of you do. I think that I agree with Mr. Withers too. Sports was just brought up as sports, but I think it should have been said better by saying extracurricular. And extracurricular activities is a huge part of any child's well-being and what they do, what they choose to do, who they get to see, whether you're good at it, whether you're not good at it, whether you love. That's part of who they are and who they'll become. And I hope that we keep on going and not steal the youth from our youth. And we do the best that we can. And as we get more information, it's fluid. Obviously, we still have weeks to go before school starts, that we continue to just monitor and make the best decisions. And I applaud you guys because, you know, I don't always agree with all of you with everything you do, but I know one thing. I can see it in your faces that everybody has worked extremely hard, and it's emotional for all of you. And I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address the committee at open forum?
Chairman Withers, there's a Diana Lynn Sacoccio, and she is from 45 Taunton Road. She would like to address the committee.
Good evening. Please feel free to address the committee.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. First of all, I'd like to thank all of you for really opening up discussions among the committee and, you know, kind of hashing it out in an open forum such as this and in live view of anyone, you know, that could attend from the community. I think this has been hard on everyone, just from, you know, personal as well as professional, as a community, as a state, and as a country. So I think this kind of all brought that together. My questions are really around the learning platforms and what the plan is for the hybrid or remote. You know, my concern is children falling behind or not having the same curriculum and learning plans as those that are doing hybrid. Should the choice be that, you know, the parents want them to go fully remote, would there be supplemental learning that would be provisioned for students if the parents, you know, request that? Is there plans to put some extra measures in place if parents and teachers feel that maybe the students are falling behind. My concern is I don't want my child, because we have to make a decision based on health factors and other reasons where they'd have to go remote, that they would be left behind because of the fact that, we have to make that decision.
Yeah, thank you. In planning for the full remote learning option, we're looking at all of the courses that are assigned to our learning management system right now, and we'll be closely aligning the courses that are in that system to our current courses that we have right now. So the next step, now that we know that we will definitely be in a hybrid mode and planning for the virtual academy with the learning management system that we know now that we're going with, we'll be able to plan for that in more detail.
And if we need to address, our concerns at a separate, will that be addressed at a separate meeting as far as once the plans have been rolled out? Will there be enough time to do that before the start of school?
Yes, so once we make our second submission to the state, which is actually on Monday, the 10th, we'll have more detail around the actual virtual academy, and then we'll continue to work on that from now up until the start of school. So we'll have it done but well before school starts, and be able to provide all of the families with that information.
Okay, thank you. And then just one more question. I know there was some discussion regarding socioeconomical issues, as far as, providing students, that don't receive normal meals other than within the school day, and then that there's a possibility that could be a problem. Is the city looking at creating some type of community involvement to assist and help with the program, to be able to supplement in that area? So for, if there are issues with deliveries or getting, students to have the meals that they would normally get in the schools themselves, are we looking at programs to be able to assist that would also allow for the community to help out?
We did deliver meals to families who indicated they needed the meals delivered in the spring. So again, if we go to a community feeding program, get approved by the federal government, we would do the same thing. If that became overwhelming for our systems, we would certainly look for other ways to get that done, yes.
Is that something that would be open to the community as a whole, or would that just be within the administration itself?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understand the question.
For those of us in the community that would be willing to assist with that in one way or another, would that be something that could be opened up to the community?
Someone would have to coordinate that. There'd be some need to make sure people understood, times and locations. So someone would have to coordinate it. It wouldn't be just kind of show up and do something, but it would be a community-wide effort, sure. We have agencies right now that are doing that this summer. So we would probably rely on them to coordinate the effort.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address the committee at open forum?
Chairman Withers, is Lucy Pacheco from 15 Birch Street who would like to address the committee.
Thank you. Hello, Ms. Pacheco. Please feel free to address the committee. Ms. Pacheco?
We can return to Ms. Pacheco.
Okay.
And we have a Amaral, who's the AEA president, who would like to address the committee.
Hello, Mr. Amaral. Good evening.
Thank you, Chairman Withers, honorable member. I'm sorry, did you hear me?
We can again. We lost you for a bit, but you're back.
Okay. I have two questions. My first question is concerning the motion to reconsider the high school remote versus hybrid vote, and I'm wondering if it was in order. My understanding of a motion to reconsider is that it must be made by a member, a voting member of the side that passed. Was that motion in order?
I believe so. I'll have to look back and see who made the motion, Mr. Amaral. I believe it was in order, but I will, we certainly can look into it.
Thank you. And my second question is, can the hybrid schedule actually be staffed?
I'll leave that to the administration.
Thank you.
The administration obviously is not aware of any reason to believe that it can't be staffed.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to address the committee at open forum?
We're going to return to Lucy Pacheco from 15 Birch Street.
Hello, Ms. Pacheco, please feel free to address the committee.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Sorry about that user error. Thank you for your time in the deliberation. I know this was difficult for everybody. I guess I just wanted some clarification on the, I know that the full remote learning is going to be different than the hybrid. And I guess curriculum wise, I wanted some more information on that before making a final decision. It sounds like you probably don't have that right at this moment, but will that be addressed soon, or when can we look forward to more specific information about the differences?
We're in the process of purchasing all the site licenses right now for the actual platform. And then once we do that, we'll be able to share all the information with families so that they'll be able to make an informed decision.
Okay, and when do you need our decision by?
We don't have a deadline yet, but we will be setting a deadline soon.
Okay, great. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to address the committee at open forum?
Chairman Withers, there was a Todd Kovas from 189 Clifton Street wishing to address the committee.
All right. Hello, Mr. Kovas.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for your votes and your consideration tonight. I just wanted to mention that I am supportive of the decision for the hybrid model, especially for K through 8. But one of the things I wanted to mention, and I know Laura Dolan brought it up, is that it appears that students that sign up for the AVA and opt to be 100% remote are going to be penalized a little bit. And I was wondering if the plans for the AVA are finalized, or if there are changes that can be made so that they're included a little bit more and so that they have the same opportunities that the other kids have. Is that cast in stone yet?
So no, I mean, these are still active plans, but I'm not aware of how anyone's being penalized. I want to clarify that the need for a remote option exists because we know we have students who cannot return to school. Not that they don't want to, but they cannot. And so we have a responsibility to educate them and to provide them an option. So that option is geared for them, and they are not going to return to school. So that's why that program is designed as one for students who don't intend to come back in person. And we don't have the means or the resources to run 2 different schools, which is why that option is going to be different from what we're doing with the teachers through the continuum of models based on the conditions. We don't have enough teachers to run a full school program for students in that program, and so that's why we need to lean on a learning system that's virtual, that's designed for this kind of work, and then staff it with teachers to facilitate the learning and support students as they move through a self-paced, personalized experience, which is different from the classroom experience that kids get in school. And that's, but again, by virtue of the fact that program is being set up for the kids who don't intend to come back. And so we're offering that, which, by the way, the state does not require that we do that, right? So if we wanted to, we could only offer that opportunity for students who cannot come back. And we're saying, no, we have to do this anyways. Why wouldn't we make this available to people who want that instead? But in doing that, we're creating a situation where we're basically running fundamentally 2 districts. And so based on the resources that we have to handle that one in a different way. Now, we're going to ensure that the educational quality of that experience is equal. It's going to be very, very different in how it's operating. So that's why we really don't, recommend that people going in thinking that they're going to go in and, we'll do this for a couple of weeks and then see how things go and then jump back into the other one, because the pacing and the way the curriculum is organized is just different. So I don't think anyone's being penalized. It's just we're being honest so people can make good decisions and understand that these are 2 different silos. They're not part of that continuum that the other 3 are. I don't know if that helps, Mr. Coker.
That does, but it sounds like there won't be any opportunity for any sort of crossover even on the remote days. They're very much 2 different silos.
They are 2 silos because teachers have a class assignment with students in them, and we have to organize around that. And so the kids that are coming in for the continuum experience, we'll be moving from remote to hybrid to in-person hopefully someday, right? So those students are going to move with their teachers in and out of those experiences. The curriculum won't change. The teacher just has to teach it differently based on the conditions. Whereas the students in the full remote, they're in remote every day no matter what, and that's the plan for the year for them. So, the 2 groups do not mix.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there anyone else who would like to address the committee at open forum?
Chairman Withers, there's Lisa Fisher from 20 Clinton Avenue. I'd like to address the committee.
Thank you. Good evening, please.
I cannot turn her mic on because she's using older version of software. I'm sorry. Next is Jennifer Alderson of 20 Ritchie Road.
Hello, Ms. Alderson. Please feel free to address the committee.
Hi, can you hear me?
You can, yes. You could.
I keep getting muted.
You're back.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, first of all, for your time on this topic. My question is whether this resolution of a hybrid mode is official at this time, or is approval ultimately needed on the submission going out on the 10th? And if so, when is this approval expected? Because in my household, we're debating whether to pull our 2 children out of the public schools as a contingency, but this isn't something that you could do last minute. And so is this vote tonight final, or do we need higher up approval for all 3 plans that we're submitting?
So the vote tonight to go hybrid is binding and final as our plan as of today. Now, I say as of today because it's 5 or 6 weeks before school starts, so there obviously could be changes with this virus that require us to come back and rethink what we're deciding today, which would be, you know, a big spike or, you know, something like that. But as of the state doesn't have to approve our decision to go hybrid, and so the decision to go hybrid is final as of now, with that caveat that, you know, if things on the ground change, 5, 6 weeks is a long time in this virus, so we may have to rethink it. But that is the plan as of now.
Okay, understood. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Is there anyone else who would like to address the committee at open forum?
Chairman, whether there's an Annabella Lewis, I don't have her address yet.
Okay. Hello, Ms. Lewis, please feel free to address the committee.
Hi, I'm not sure if you can hear me.
We can.
Hi. So I'm a mother of 2 children with special needs. One of them having very complex medical health issues, and my son who's on the spectrum. Both kids are going into high school. I have strong concerns around the virtual learning, especially for my son, and what it's going to look like in the fall. I went into a start of summer where I'm thinking, you know what, they're going to have to go remotely because of my daughter. But now I'm having second thoughts on it because of my son. I don't see how the virtual learning platform is going to work for him, especially since he's on the spectrum. But again, I still have strong concerns due to my daughter. So it's kind of like a catch-22 for me. I'm damned if I do and damned if I don't. Also, I was told today by my daughter's doctor that, you know, if she does go back to school, he recommends 6 feet apart, not 3 feet apart. And you guys are saying, well, you know, the 3 feet apart would work. But in reality, for kids like my daughter, it wouldn't. So like I said, I do have strong concerns. And also, I do want to thank the school committee for doing their part in, you know, helping us out in administration. However, I am disappointed on the second cast. I feel like that certain committee members kind of, like someone said, bullied the other ones. So it's you know, kind of, you know, shame on them. So it's basically it. But thank you.
Thank you.
Steve?
Yes.
I do think as you said, it being binding, it's important that before the meeting adjourns for tonight, that we get clarity on whether or not it was a valid motion.
So I have, when open forum is over, I'm going to, just because of the significance of this vote and all the time everyone's put into it, and I'm not sure who made the motion, I'm going to ask for another motion to reconsider and make sure that it's all done with the I's dotted and T's crossed. Because I don't want into a situation where, you know, this committee spent 4.5, 5 hours here tonight and spent even more time working on this, and then because of something trivial like that, it was called into question. So we'll make sure that it's done by the letter of the letter of the rules.
Yeah, I wouldn't characterize it as trivial. Just, you know, it is the rules and they're important because as we run it by. So, but yeah, so good. I'm glad we'll get to the bottom of that.
Thanks. Is there anyone else who would like to address the committee at open forum?
Chairman Williams, we do have a technical issue with Lisa Fisher. She has asked you to repeat her question.
Okay.
Is that acceptable?
Sure.
Okay. So this is from Lisa Fisher from 20 Clinton Avenue. Her question is, I have one child going to kindergarten and one going into 2nd grade. Both are terrified to attend school with fears that they catch the virus and pass to their grandmother. It is my understanding that if they do remote learning, that a home inspection is required, and if things change with the virus,
Yeah, no home inspection is required, and if they do choose to go to the Attleboro Remote Academy, they will be able to re-enter the traditional schooling model, and if there's spaces at Hill Roberts, that's where they'll be put. But so I think the answer to I think she was mistaken. Is there anyone else who would like to address the committee at open forum?
There are no other residents.
All right, thank you. I'll close open forum. Just as had been said before, there was a motion to reconsider the vote on the high school that was made. It is required to be made by someone on the prevailing side. I'm not sure who made the motion. I don't want to, we'll have to go back and watch it, but just out of an abundance of caution, realizing the gravity of this decision and what has been done tonight, I do want to just make sure that everything was done correctly so it can't be questioned. So at this time, I will entertain a motion to reconsider the vote on the high school going remote.
So moved.
Second.
So
Shannon.
Shannon made the motion.
All right. Ms. Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Geddes.
Yes.
Mr. Withers, yes. Mr. Larson.
Yes.
Mr. Storrs.
Yes.
Ms. Porto.
Yes.
Mr. Domenici.
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer.
Yes.
Mr. Hill.
No.
So we have a motion to go hybrid at the high school. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Johnson.
Excuse me, Chairman. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
No.
What?
Just a question.
What?
Because before we start the vote, so just to clarify, now that the reconsideration is passed, the motion is to approve whether or not the high school
We'll
goes
go hybrid.
Goes hybrid.
Hybrid.
And the reason I ask that is because for K through 4 and the middle school, we started with in person. And I think that's where the confusion might have been
Sure.
with how this,
and
how
so,
this happened.
right. And so the reason,
Because when
right,
you
I
get
think
out
there
of high
was some
school-
confusion on the first vote.
Right.
And that's my fault as doing the vote. The reason I'm skipping in person with restrictions for the high school is because the administration has said it's not feasible for us to be able to do so.
Right. I think that's more of what the confusion was, not so much about sports. And this is as a person who thinks we should be remote. So I just wanted to make that as a comment.
I just want to say, I think I was the one that made the motion, and I was not on the prevailing side, so I apologize about that. We don't do a lot of motions to reconsider in this committee, so I don't think it's ever happened, so I apologize for that. So, but I am glad, thank you, Mr. Amaral, so that we're doing this the right way.
Right, just before you start, so the motion to approve going hybrid at the Attleboro High School was made by
Shannon, seconded by Rob.
So same as the vote to reconsider. Thank you.
Ms. Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Geddes.
Yes.
Mr. Withers, yes. Mr. Larson.
Yes.
Mr. Storrs.
Yes.
Ms. Porter.
Yes.
Mr. Domenici.
No.
Ms. Sawyer.
No.
Mr. Hill.
No.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you for humoring me there with just making sure that we get that right. As Mr. Storrs said, it's a little bit more in the weeds than we usually get here. Is there any other issues to be brought before the committee? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
Mr. Hill,
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer,
Yes.
Mr. Domenici,
Yes.
Ms. Porto,
Yes.
Mr. Storrs,
Yes.
Mr. Larson, Mr. Withers, yes. Mr. Geddes,
Yes.
Mrs. Johnson.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.